I'm quite sceptical about people sticking to rigid career plans. I think in the modern age, everything's moving so fast and the environment is changing so quickly. The truth is, the job role we may be aspiring to may not even exist in 5 years' time. So the idea that you can stick to a rigid career plan with a rigid job title that you're going for at a rigid timeline, I think that could actually be quite limiting for people in their careers. I think it's a much better approach as you start mapping out what you want to do in your career is actually go back to what it is about your job you like. What is it that you're good at and that gets you out of bed in the morning, that the bit of your day you most enjoy. Identify those things and then work out, well, what roles will actually get me doing more of that stuff and less of the stuff that I don't enjoy quite so much. And quite often that will mean it's a lateral leap that you may need to take. Maybe it's an opportunity that you hadn't thought of yourself. Maybe it's often not the next obvious promotion in your current workplace, but I think it's having that sense of what you look for in your job and then being open-minded about what type of role can give you those things is probably about the most sensible career plan you can have right now. Well, I was a suit, so I came up through account management, and really when you're in account management, you get lots of opportunity for affirmation that you're doing a good job. A lot of your yardsticks for success are relatively frequent and quite visible. So, you launch a campaign, you win a pitch, you win an award, you get a promotion, you make budget. They're all relatively frequent opportunities to shine and relatively visible signs of progress. Interestingly, when you go into leadership, that's not necessarily the case. Quite a lot of the things that you have to focus on, they're often quite invisible, which might be things like succession planning. There might be long-term, which is about strategic direction for the business or building out the capabilities of the business. Or there can be quite intangible things like staff engagement or the quality of your bench and those things. So you have to go from finding your job satisfaction from things that are quite visible and quite frequent to things that basically you set your own motivation and you set your own benchmark for success. That's a really tricky transition to make, and you have to understand that you've got to judge yourself. You have to be aware as a leader that there's a moment when you need some separation, and you've got to find what that is. And for me, really, that has been mainly family. I've always had a very strong sense of when work needs to finish and family life starts. And hopefully my wife would agree. I've done a reasonably good job of staying true to that. The other thing I've always done, it's a personal thing, but I don't like blurring my working time from the office to home. So I really hardly ever take work home. I hardly ever do work at home because, again, for me, it introduces grey between the separation. The biggest thing that as a leader or a boss or whatever, what you don't want is surprises. What you don't want is only hearing about things when it's too late to fix them or they've got so toxic that it's a bigger problem than it needed to be. So I think managing upward is really about, there has to be clear boundaries on expectations about the roles, but then there has to be very, very open and frequent communication. And there's a tendency when you're managing upwards that you think that the less I tell them, the better. In fact, the opposite is true. The more you share and the more you explain what you're doing and the more you flag things that could be happening, both good and bad, in advance, it's a much more productive relationship, and you find you get a lot more autonomy that way because it builds the trust that's essential in that relationship. A good number of the people that have worked for me have now moved on into their own leadership positions, both within and outside of advertising. So really, for me, if I've had some small part in those people going on their leadership journey. I don't think it's right to have a single role model in leadership. I think people can get a little bit sort of put on a pedestal and be heroic. I think one of the key things in leadership is being authentic, and there's lots of material around authentic leadership. And I don't think you can be authentic if you're trying to model yourself on someone else's style. So I think the trick is identifying the great things that lots of different leaders do and learning from what they do, but then building that into your own leadership style, because the minute you try and mimic someone else, you're being inauthentic and your people will see through it in a flash. And I've seen that happen where you've seen people get a promotion and suddenly they turn up on a Monday as if they were a different person than when they left the office on a Friday, just because they got a different business card. And you actually lose respect through that and trust. And I think it's really important that rather than try and copy someone else, you've got to be true to your own style.